This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Monday. How's everybody doing today? Junk silver. It refers to old circulation coins like dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars from back before the government debased our money by removing the silver from our coinage. I might actually say that today's coinage, not having silver in it, is the actual junk silver. I said that last week. I'm like, why is it called junk silver? Anyways, probably because we throw it in the junk drawer and think nothing of it. But in a truly barter system, let's say we get back to the days of barter and things under Carney or this fearless leadership we have in Ottawa right now get worse, you might think that junk silver, you might want to polish it off. Well, here at Silver Gold Bull, they have an offer on these junk silver. I still don't want to call it that. I'm going to have a call with the old Silver Gold Bull. Let's call it something different here. Oh, well. I digress. Either way, you can text or email Grahame for details on this feature or any other questions you may have around buying, selling, storing, or using your retirement accounts to invest in precious metals. Just shoot Grahame a text. If you're on silvergoldbull.ca or .com, make sure to reference the Shaun Newman Podcast when making your purchases. Bow Valley Credit Union is your Alberta-regulated, fully serviced financial institution and is proud to present the first in Canada gold collateral lending. Now all of you can lend against your physical gold and silver for favorable rates. It's like a HELOC on your gold and silver. Don't have any physical gold or silver? No worries. They can also help you get a loan to purchase your gold and silver. All you got to do is contact Leanna at welcome@bowvalleycu.com to get your BVCU membership and maybe add an e-metals account today. For all information, just head over to bowvalleycu.com. Profit River. Well, while you're stocking up on silver and you're getting a new bank account because you're like, these guys are awesome, the next thing you want to do, this is for anyone in Canada, is you probably want to, what was it at the original, the first Cornerstone Forum? It was Bitcoin, it was gold, and it was lead. That was the argument that was had, and there was a strong case made for lead. Well, look no further than Profit River. Here in Canada, they ship everywhere. They are the major retailers of firearms, optics, and accessories. They serve all of Canada, and now you can reach out to SNP at profitriver.com. It's down in the show notes, and you're going to get Joel. He's the primary contact for all of you, and he is their phone and internet sales manager. You're bypassing everybody to get to the man who knows all the things about lead and guns and all the accessories in there. When you have any purchase, whether it's in-store, on the phone, online, make sure to use the code SNP. That's going to get you in for $100 gift cards each month, and all you got to do, profitriver.com. I would suggest maybe taking a little boo there before Canada outlaws everything they can sell. Once again, they are the major retailers of firearms, optics, and accessories, and they serve all of you beautiful people here in Canada. The Cornerstone Forum, heading to Calgary, May 10th. Yeah, you want to get on that, folks. It's coming up real fast. We had some people ask if we'd heard about Edison Motors on Mashup 150. Well, Chase Barber, founder of Edison Motors, is going to be there. Friday's guest, Chris Sims, also going to be there. There's a whole group of people coming into Calgary May 10th, and we got a hotel, we got a trade show, and it's going to be one action-packed day. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to retweet. If you haven't subscribed to the Substack yet, make sure to do that. It comes out every Sunday night at 5. It's free. There is a paid portion, but certainly that is a way to stay up to date on all things SNP. All right, let's get on to the tale of the tape. She's a Canadian media personality and content creator who hosts Over Opinionated on YouTube. I'm talking about Jasmin Laine. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jasmin Laine. Ma'am, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. There is so much to talk about right now.
Well, there certainly is, but this is your first time on the podcast. You've been suggested a couple times. We got a mutual friend in Wayne Peters. I've seen you've done other people that I know in the space, or hopped on their shows. Done. That's probably not the right.
Yeah, chill out.
Not the exact right words there. And I'm like, wow, I guess it's high time that I invited you on this side. So I'm curious. I always love a good origin story, and since it's your first time on the podcast, tell us a little bit about Jasmin before we get into the wacky world of Canada.
Yeah, well, I was a broadcaster for about 11 years. Or I shouldn't say a broadcaster. I worked in broadcasting for 11 years. I was on air for 8, if I'm not mistaken, of those years. Came, award winner. And all that jazz for my amazing charm. Yeah, I did that for quite some time. It was my entire life, my everything. And I don't really know exactly why I decided to take a risk, but I certainly did. And I went independent and have just been really largely covering Canadian politics ever since. But obviously I have the gift of gab. So I decided to use those talents outside of the mainstream. There were definitely a number of instances where things had happened that, you're not ever directly told don't talk about that, but you're not allowed to talk about that. So there was lots of moments like that. And I think I kind of just got to a point where I was kind of tired of things being taken out of context, or things being, it's things that I would say, being turned around on me almost to maintain whatever narrative it was that people wanted to maintain. I was kind of tired of self-censoring and feeling like I was stomped on, I guess, for lack of better words. And I just kind of hit a breaking point, really. And I decided that, well, I guess I'm just going to open up a YouTube page. It seems like all the cool kids are doing that right now. And then, much to my surprise, I never once expected that it was going to even have 100 people listening to it, let alone, I'm over 10 million views and stuff at this point on YouTube alone, which is just, whoa. I don't quite know how to wrap my head around that yet. But it's been a really beautiful journey overall. There's things about my past career that I'm not the happiest about, I suppose, but also I wouldn't be anywhere where I am today if it weren't for that. So of course I'm eternally grateful for all the connections and everything I learned.
Now, you're a Manitoba girl, right?
Sure am. Prairies, baby.
Yeah, we won't hold that against you too much. Okay.
It's fine. Everybody always craps on Manitoba, and you know what?
Everybody always craps on Saskatchewan. All right, so we're
true.
friendly neighbors, but we
at least have beautiful lakes. Both of us do. So
yes. Well, I grew up in Saskatchewan. Now I live in Alberta, just across the border. So it's funny.
Wow.
I used to go to Riders games and enjoy the Labor Day Classic when the Riders were good and they were crapping on or stomping on the Bombers. That hasn't been the case of late. So I
gotta ask you something now that you say that. The watermelon head thing, is that real? Do people actually do that, or is that like
That's
AI
real.
generated? It is.
No, it's real. Oh yeah.
Isn't that heavy?
No, they hollow it out. They I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think it's awesome. You know what? I never get to talk sports on here. That's what I used to just love, bringing on different athletes and everything else. Saskatchewan Roughrider fans, I don't have a ton of time for the CFL as a whole, folks. Sorry, I'm not like this diehard CFL guy. But one of the things I will give credit to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they have the most loyal fan base I have ever seen, been a part of. And I always go back to when I was a kid. The Grey Cup was in Edmonton, and my mom and dad probably could afford things like that back then. I don't know. CFL is probably still pretty cheap. So we went to the game in Edmonton, and it was like -30. It was freezing cold. Everybody's bundled up. Probably everybody's drunk. Now that I look at it, everybody was drunk. And Doug Flutie, it was like Doug Flutie's last game in the CFL, and he absolutely stomped us. It was like 45-8. And with like 2 minutes left, all the drunk Rough Rider fans started chanting, "We're number 2." And I don't know of another fan base that would ever do such a thing.
That is actually amazing.
Isn't it? And
that's really great.
So I got to, that's my fun little rider story, because I don't watch any football anymore, or, I don't have time for that. Obviously we're both in this weird realm of the void that's been Canadian politics. That's how you stumble into my circle now. And yet when I listened to your story, you remind me of, I was thinking about it before I hopped on here. Like when it comes to radio, I don't know, is it DJs, commentary hosts?
Personalities,
Sure,
yeah.
personalities. Like I think of in Manitoba, I've had Shadow Davis on from there. But if I come back this way, Heather Prozac out of Calgary has been on, and then if I go to Vancouver, that's Kid Carson, and I've had him on, and like you all come on, and personalities is the right word. You guys all have these like fun personalities that's easy to just throw stuff back and forth. And in fairness, morning shows, that's exactly what it is. You flick on the morning, it's got to be something that catches your attention real fast. Yeah. And man, I never get to talk sports or any of that cool stuff anymore. What do you miss talking about?
Okay, honestly, and I'm hoping that perhaps after an election, depending on the results, I can start to slowly integrate this into my content. But I absolutely love talking about like social politics, culture stuff. Whether that be something wild that a celebrity is doing that just makes no sense and like totally goes against my values, and just really being able to kind of stir the pot on that.
Why can't you do that right now?
Because it's just.
I mean, we just had P. Diddy, and you're like, that's Hollywood. You could talk about that. You could talk about every. You could talk about. Well, that was a year ago. It was a year ago at the Super Bowl where Taylor Swift was surrounded by like, I don't know, upside down crosses and weird stuff like that. And you're like, this is strange. Like this is strange, folks. Anyways.
I'm definitely hoping to be able to. I love politics. Truly, I have always
really
loved.
You've
politics.
Always loved it
Since I think I was 13 when I first started really getting into it. Also though too, here's a little bit more backstory. Like, I grew up really poor. Like I lived in a trailer with a bunk bed with 6 other kids in the middle of the boonies. My family did not have money. Like I never went to post-secondary school. Getting into radio is just something that I'm still, it's just beyond me how I did. But
how did you get, whoa. How did you get into it then? You didn't, in my brain, I don't never like to put a date on a woman. I don't want to know your age, but I'm going 11 years. Post-secondary.
I'm 28. So.
You're 28. There you go. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So when I was in
a 96. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
When I was in high school, though, there was a parade float that was for a radio station, and I was there, and I don't know why. I think at the time I was 16, and I was planning already about going into school. I wanted to be a nurse. Obviously, that's very expensive, and to be honest, I think I would have been a terrible nurse because I can't even pop my own zits. It grosses me out. So it's probably a good thing I didn't get that profession. But I had seen this float, and I just immediately something clicked, and I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to be a radio show host, which is funny because I was such a loser, and like I had no friends in high school at all. My family flipped houses, so we moved all over the place. Like when I was in high school, I went to 5 different schools in a matter of 3 years. So I was always just kind of like that weird loner kid that everybody probably thought had just transferred from being homeschooled or something, because I was just random the time of the year that I'd pop in. But that was just what I wanted to do. I can't even explain it. It was just this insane drive and spark that I had in me after I saw that float. I don't know. They were having so much fun, and I loved the music, and this is what I want to do. And so immediately after that, I went to one of my teachers in school, and I told him I don't even remember what his last name is, but I do know that his first name is Steve, which is weird. You usually don't know that about your teachers. But so I had gone to him, and I told him about this dream, and he was super receptive, and he actually started calling around like crazy to a bunch of different radio stations and TV stations. And I was fortunate in being a loser in school when I was in my younger years of high school. I never wanted to take spares or anything like that. That's what they're called, right? Spares.
Yes.
Where you have like a skipped class or whatever.
Yeah.
I never wanted to take those because I didn't really have anybody to hang out with or anything to do. So even when I was in grade 8 or 9, if I'm not mistaken, I was already taking classes for the following school year at that point in time. So by the time that I was nearing my senior years of high school, I had nothing but wide open schedules. I would have like 1, maybe 2 classes a day, if that. And we were able to work something out where I did breakfast television as a student intern from 6 a.m. until noon. I'd go to school, I'd do my 1 class for the afternoon there, and then that would be it for the day. say. And so I had a student internship throughout almost my entire grade 12 year, actually, where I did the first half was television, the second half was radio. And of course, this is all thanks to my teacher, Mr. Steve, whose last name I forget, who he had put all of that together for me. And I remember I was planning on going to school for radio, and there was a radio station I was interning at the time. And they said to me, like, have you already applied? And I said no. And the cost of it's way higher now than it was back then, but it was around $18,000 or something for a 10-month program back then, which I definitely couldn't afford. And they said, don't bother, we're just going to hire you. And I was like, oh, okay. So I canceled my application to go to that post-secondary, and they ended up hiring me. I worked there for 2 years, and that was a smaller out-of-town station. And then after 2 years, I really wanted to break into the Winnipeg market, which is a medium-sized market. So I started just contacting as many people as I possibly could and told them kind of all about my dreams. And I remember there was one program director who's, for people who don't know, the program director is the head honcho. They make all of the decisions for any station it is that they're under or that they're overseeing. And he had agreed to set up a meeting with me. He told me repeatedly, there's absolutely no jobs. You shouldn't waste your time coming here. But nonetheless, we had a meeting. He reiterated again, we're not going to hire you. We have no openings. And I started making the drive. I was about an hour and a half or so away from the city at that point. And he called me while I was on the road to go to this meeting. And he said, again, there's no jobs at all. And he said, I also have a meeting. So I think, it's probably just better. Like, let's just have a phone call. And I remember I said to him, I was like, well, that sucks because I'm already on my way and I've been on the road for 45 minutes or something at this point, and I'm not turning around to go back home. So I'll wait in the lobby until your meeting is over, but I really need you to meet me. And the reason for that was just because I knew that it was such a slim shot, but I just felt like as soon as he saw me and saw how passionate I was or something, that he'd be like, this is the best one ever. And then that actually ended up kind of being what had happened. I ended up going to the radio station in the city that day. I was there for probably about 4 hours, actually. I waited for him from this meeting. And I remember he came out into the hall, shook my hand, took me into his office, and again said, we have no jobs at all. We kind of talked a little bit about the industry. And then he was like, well, I guess, I'll give you a tour of the station. And so there happened to be another show that was on at the time. They were live. And I think he was just trying to pawn me off and so that he didn't have to deal with me. And I ended up sitting in on this other radio show that was going on at the time for about 3 hours or something. And when the show was over, because most radio shows don't usually surpass 4 hours of on-air time, I went back into his office and was just going to thank him for allowing me to come there and see everything. And he offered me a job on the spot. So I ended up working there for another, I think it was close to 4.5 years. And then I got a morning show job after that I was headhunted for, did that for another just about 4 years. Yeah. And then, yeah, now I'm doing this. So
you're hearkening back to when I first started podcasting, I got to interview a ton of people and hear how they got to where they are. And usually there's like this, not on all, but there's a lot where you're like, huh, that's really interesting. And I'm going back to teacher Steve, which you can't remember his last name, which is hilarious and fantastic and sad all in the same, all in the same go. But I'm like, do you get to where you're at if he doesn't do what he does?
absolutely not.
Maybe.
I don't
maybe
think so.
Maybe there's a way, And I always think like, I tell this story and people laugh at me now. Okay. Full-time podcaster. This is my living. This is what I do. And I had this idea for a hockey draft. This is probably 2016, somewhere in there. And I needed sponsors for it. So I go to this guy who now is Clay Smiley, folks, and is Profit River. And everybody knows that because he sells guns and he's a sponsor of the show. And I pitch him this idea and I'm looking for him to sponsor it. He goes, how much do you need? And, people are like, oh, did you ask him for like $500, $1,000, whatever? I asked him for $50. And when I think back on it, his face was like, $50? All right. He opens his wallet, takes out 50. He's like, don't even give me a receipt. But I was so over the moon that somebody would believe in my crappy idea because it turned out to be a crappy idea. Don't get me wrong. But what the reason of the story is is like, I take that with me and I try and remember that wherever I go, because you just never know what a little bit of belief in somebody can do for them, right? So you look at teacher Steve, and Steve, like, I don't know, maybe he did that for every kid.
Mhm.
Or maybe he saw something. I have no idea, because obviously it'd be interesting to have Steve on, and he'd be like, oh yeah, there's always
He'd
a
probably be
student
like, who is that? I don't even remember
maybe.
her.
But he went the extra mile and did something that absolutely lit up your world. And
Mhm.
now you look at where you're at and the things that are going on. Like, that's I miss the feel good stories, because they're everywhere. Like, everybody, if you just listen to people, you hear it all the time. You're like, oh man, that's fascinating. Like,
Mhm.
who was this person? Why did they do that? Back in the 80s here, when like we had all the high interest rates and people went through some very dark times. And these are people that are in my community are like very successful business owners.
Mhm.
They talk about the dark days, and there was a banker, Kulak, and I forget his first name. Isn't that funny? You can't remember the last name. I can't remember the
Steve?
first name. And
Just watch. His first name is Steve.
that's right. And they talk about how they were like in really dark times, like suicidal times. And in walks this guy and just gives them like some hope. And the hope goes, and now they're like community pillars of my community now. And I'm like, that's a wild story. That's one person.
Mhm. It's
Just think of what
beautiful.
one person can do. And I hear it in your story, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I say, there's some things, especially towards the end of my career, that they keep me up at night if I think about them for too long, just with how some things went down and some things that happened. But as a whole, it's like, wow, what a blessing. What a blessing, all of those weird little pieces where it's like all the odds are against you almost. But, I here I am. I'm like, I don't care if you say no, I'm coming to your workplace. Like, that's crazy. But I
But
did
it's
it.
awesome. But it's
And, and
but
voila.
you sit there and you think of that guy and you go, oh, he probably didn't want to talk to me. Maybe. But after a while, if he's got his head on his shoulders, he's going, look at this girl. I can't get half my employees to stay for the last 5 minutes of a shift, let alone sit here unpaid and be engaged. It's like,
Yeah.
this is interesting, right? Like, that would be something that, like, that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
That's a cool story.
Thank you. I don't get to tell it very often anymore, so it's
Well,
kinda nice
on this
to go
show,
back.
when it's your first go, I think of, I'm not a Marvel guy, I'm a DC guy. But and I know people are superheroed out, but I like what they did. They did the origin story, and on
Mhm.
this side, I'm like, I don't know you. I've listened to I've been on one show with you for like literally a hot 10 seconds,
Yeah.
and then you were gone. And I've listened to you on another show, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I've watched some of your stuff. It's cool. And I'm like, but I don't know who you are, and I assume the audience doesn't. So like, I love a good origin story. I love hearing what makes someone tick. The fact you're 96, I'm an 86, so I got 10 years on you, which
Oh
makes me
gosh.
feel old. But then again, I'm like, I feel like 86 is pretty young. So it's cool
You
to
have so much
see.
hair still. Good for you.
I know. I'm doing something right. That's right. That's right. What you talk politics, okay? Well, sorry, folks. There. I'm done with because I love digging into people and who they are. When you look at today's political scene here in Canada, what's sticking out to you today?
Boy, that is such a loaded question. I would say a lot of disappointment is sticking out to me first and foremost, and a lot of I would say systemic, for sure, intentional things that are happening so that people don't look into more information about things. And that's also incredibly disappointing. More than anything, though, actually, I would say division. There is so much division, and that part is just wild to me. Wild how much that has taken hold. I feel like Canada is almost, no matter what, kind of screwed right now. Hopefully that's not the case. I heard earlier today an election is allegedly being called on Sunday, so
I think
will
we're
see.
all hearing the same thing. Everybody's
Mhm.
assuming Sunday an election is being called. Now,
I think as
when
soon as
this
CBC said it, I was like, okay, that is for sure happening.
when this
A source
airs,
says.
when this airs, that'll be yesterday, because this doesn't air till
Okay.
Monday, which is wait, yeah, Monday. Yep. So I sit there and I go, we may have an election by the time this is aired. I don't know. That's interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it almost kind of has to happen, right? With
Does
Mark
it?
Carney and with him not having a seat, I think it would be really bad. I think it would look bad if if it wasn't. But who knows? I don't know. At the same time, having said that, I'm very surprised. I actually wasn't expecting it. I mean, you had one of the ministers, I can't remember what he is now, but he was saying just yesterday, aka Wednesday, that he kept saying, oh, well, if there's an election, we'll see if there's an election. So I'm like, the wording around it has been very odd, in my opinion. It's funny too, even going into politics stuff, one of the biggest reasons why I kind of decided to make my YouTube channel largely about politics was actually due to mental health related reasons.
Okay.
I don't want to get into it too much today, but I lost my ex-boyfriend. We were together 10 years and he took his life, and he was super involved in politics. And definitely, I was also involved in politics too, and from a young age. And he always used to tell me that I should do something like this. And I was always too scared about losing my job in media. And then after he died, I was like, whatever, I don't care anymore. I've been to hell and back already. There's nothing anybody can do.
Isn't that a wild thought? On this side, coming from a sports background, there's like, they joke about it. You can watch, they don't talk about, you're not supposed to talk about politics and faith are probably the two taboo subjects. And yet probably, I think I safely say this for all sports fans listening. Like, what was the number one show or number one segment, I should say, for like 30 years? It was Ron and Don. It was Coach's Corner. And what did Don Cherry do all the time?
Yeah.
Talk politics. He literally brought up what was going on in the world, and then Ron would chide him, and they were two sides of a similar coin, but obviously Don had his one side, which was conservative, and one side was Ron, who's certainly liberal, and they argued about it. Why was it so important? Well, because I think Don really embodied what a lot of Canadians think about our country. And then you had Ron there to try to keep him, not too far off.
It's a wonderful balance, I think.
It was. And it was also a signal to all conservatives when they were moved on Remembrance Day of all days, right? And the one he talked about the most, like, it's open season. And so I find it funny because one of my biggest fears on this side is when I started talking openly about politics, openly about COVID. Oops, that was a tough one. But freeing, very freeing. And now I think we've done the full gambit. I'm like, don't get me wrong. There's some topics where I'm like, why are we talking about this? But at the same time, I'm like, if I lost those people, if that's going to turn them off, I've probably lost them a long time ago. Cause like we talk about everything on this side. It's very freeing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you know what, too? I think that was something big that I realized. The reason why I say mental health, too, is because there's such a huge correlation. And there's so many people who think, oh, it's just politics. I don't care. I'm not political. But like every single thing about politics affects your life. Everything does. It affects what you're happy about, you're mad about, you're sad about. It affects why you're struggling. It affects why you aren't struggling. It affects why traffic is so backed up now and it wasn't 5 years ago. It affects why you can't get a house. Like, it affects the social media feed that you're seeing. Like, politics really plays such a massive role. And, initially I had really just wanted to talk mental health. That is still something I'm incredibly passionate about. And, I do public speaking engagements as well on suicide prevention and stuff like that at this point in time. And then I also have this political side, which is definitely much more of my online version of me, I suppose. But I always do just find that tie in. And, you see how people are with each other these days, the division. You kind of asked before, like, well, what is the landscape right now? How does it make you feel? And it's like, yeah, I think that politics right now are really bad. And that's why people are feeling the way that they're feeling. As an example to that, I have a friend of mine who he's been in Canada for about 10 years or so now, but he finally got his citizenship on Monday. It was a beautiful ceremony. And one thing that he had said to me, I saw him as well on Saturday prior to the ceremony. And he said, when I first moved, he's from Argentina. And he said, when I first moved here, when I first was thinking about moving here, I came to Canada and nobody ever talked about politics. And then I came back to Canada again about a year and a half later, and nobody talked about politics. And that was when I knew that I really wanted to be Canadian. And so he then started the process to, work really hard and try to find a way to get a work visa and all of these things. That took him a little while to do. And he said when he came back here, and he had, achieved all of those things that he needed to get permanent residency and be able to work and all that stuff, find a place to live. He said that he was really surprised because it had been a couple of years. And so we're talking, maybe 2017, late 2016. And he said everybody was talking about politics. And he said, that's when I knew that something was really wrong, because where I come from, everybody talks about politics. And the reason why it doesn't matter what side you're on is because something is going on in the government that's really, really bad. And so either that's people who are now so focused on the government handouts that they have just become these, they're completely incapable of really doing anything. They just rely on that government check. And Argentina, prior to Milei, had massive social assistance for their population, and it was crippling. It was horrible. It was horrible what it did to their economy. It was horrible what it did to the mental health of their residents. And he said, there'd be people who would be fighting, because there was people like me who were old enough to remember what it was like when you could actually, like Argentina at the time, it's not like it was a first world country or anything back when he was a kid, but he's like, I remember being able to work for things, and you could actually like feel accomplished and proud of yourself. You could have dreams, and then all of a sudden, as time went on and new governments came in that were particularly very left leaning, very much like so many similarities, honestly, to many of the things that the Trudeau government discussed, many of the things that Mark Carney has discussed. And he said it was just fascinating how you had people who were so dependent on the government that they would never, ever vote in somebody who would take that away from them. And they would think that the people who were taking that away from them were the bad guys. But he's like, but they aren't the bad guys, though, because they want you to do what you're supposed to do as a human and to have pride and work hard. And they want you to make money. They have to take away those other things in order for you to be able to make money, like so that you can do something for yourself instead of doing nothing all day and just relying on them to take care of you. Like, this is so messed up. And he said too, on Saturday when I was with him, that he said that he's like, there's a lot of things in Canada and the way that people talk nowadays with so much of these social programs and the way that they treat each other if you're opposed to them. He's like, it reminds me a lot of being home. And so then to summarize there, he said that he is incredibly excited to vote in this year's election so that he can do whatever he can to make sure that Canada does not turn into what his home was. So I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's Argentina. I mean, like, that country is there's been lots of people warning we could turn into exactly that. Mm-hmm. And certainly hearing that story is, echoes what I've heard. And certainly there's a group of Eastern Europeans who listen to the show and chime in lots. And we've had on the show warning about, the direction we're heading and everything else in this country. Two things really interest me, I guess, about your story and where you're from. One is a different province. I always find, in Canada, when you get different provinces on to talk where they're at and what they're seeing, I always find that fascinating. Mm-hmm. And then you being a decade younger than me, I'm curious because, like in this space, I'm thinking about this now. I always consider myself one of the young ones,
I beat you.
You definitely did. And that's interesting. Because I guess, like, I'm sure I'm missing people, folks. But, like, on the whole, if we sit here and we think about it, all the people I rattled off from radio, Heather, I'm probably a smidge older than I assume. But everybody else, I'm younger. And, like, a ton of the people beating the drum in media, even alternative media, are my seniors. They're older mm-hmm. than me. And so you being younger and from a different province, I guess I'm just curious, what do you see, like, do you think conservatives have a shot in this election?
I want to say yes. I genuinely don't know. I thought yes for quite some time. That's also interesting because you said you're in Alberta, correct?
Correct.
So Manitoba, very, very different politically than Alberta from what I gather. And Manitoba is definitely a very, very left-leaning province for the most part. We did have a conservative premier for quite some time. They did not a good job and they got booted out. and replaced by Wab Kinew, who he's run some pretty incredible deficits. He has spent money on some pretty wild things. And you have a very good chunk of people, though, who, again, they don't fully comprehend the long-term damage of that type of spending or those types of priorities, because they're just happy for whatever that handout that they're getting is, right? And so I see that a lot here, and it's incredibly infuriating. And I think too, going back to what I was saying earlier, like I grew up and I did not come from a wealthy family in the slightest. And we didn't have a computer. We didn't have like anything really for a good chunk of my life. And what I used to do is I would go into the school library and I would just print off like full Wikipedia pages of things. And so when I was very young, I had started researching, the Book of Revelation. I was researching the New World Order. I was researching the World Economic Forum, like all these things, because I just thought they were so wild to hear. And I was so fascinated to read all of these things. And so I think that kind of puts me in a bit of a unique perspective. And also even just the fact that, I wasn't on social media around the same time as everybody around me was. I wasn't in the same friend groups with the same types of influences. I actually often say, like in high school, had I been in that school for a long period of time, rather than like my grade 12 year as an example, I was only there that year. And so I didn't have the time to develop the friendships and stuff that most people do, which I resent, but also I'm happy for. Obviously it's kind of weird. People are like, oh, cool. So who are your friends? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I have like 7 of them and they're from all over the place and none of them know each other. So weird friend group here. But I feel really lucky as well that I was not, just due to my situation at the time, involved in really any echo chambers at all. Like I really wasn't. And I think that was a huge benefit to thinking the way that I do, or a huge disservice to people who don't like what I talk about. But
who introduced you? You mentioned printing off Wikipedia pages. Who introduced you to the WEF and different ideas like that? Because I'm like, I think of myself even 5 years ago, I'd never heard of any of these things, right? And it's because of COVID and the way we went on this show and the choices he made in life and on, that it started to really like, what the heck is going on? So as you pull on that thread, then it's almost impossible you didn't stumble on the WEF and, well, about 10 other things. But regardless, you're talking about stumbling upon this, like, if I'm doing the math correct, then like 10 years ago. You're like,
oh yeah,
like easy. Okay, so I highly doubt a kid just walks in and goes, I want to talk about World Economic Forum. Boop, boop, boop. Like, was this a family thing? Was this a friend thing? Like, how did you stumble into that?
I know the New World Order came to mind after I was reading the Book of Revelation, and researching that at length. Lots of the information from back then, I honestly don't remember as well as I used to. I should probably refresh a little bit just for my own sanity. But the New World Order came after researching that. And that was largely due to, being online and searching for things. And then you'd have like a random article pop up or something. And I was like, what is that? And I'm such a curious person and I love jumping into rabbit holes and picking apart things and finding pieces that relate. And it's genuinely like, that is, most girls, you want to go out to the club on a Saturday night. I'm like, no way, give me a Wikipedia page. I'm ready. So that was kind of what got into there. And then when it came to the WEF, that was actually after about when I remember seeing something. Oh, this is what sparked it. I went to, funny enough, a We Day event, and Al Gore was the speaker, and he was talking a lot about climate change related things, obviously. And there were some things that he said that at a young age definitely put fear into me, which is obviously why that is so effective. And I remember him saying some things and some statistics. And then when I got home from that event, I just was like, well, I've never really heard of any of this stuff before up until he was talking about it. And I want to learn more. I'm curious about all of this because like he's saying things that sound really scary, but nobody around me is talking about it. So does that mean that it is something and that I'm smarter than them, or am I stupid? And are they talking about it in code? Like, I don't know. And so after that presentation was when I decided to go home and I started researching some things about Al Gore. And that was when there ended up being a trail back to World Economic Forum related policies.
That's kind of, you're not built like most, right? Like most would just be, okay, all right, carry on with life.
Yeah, I'm kind of a loser, but in a good way, I think.
So when you tie all those things together and you go back to where I started this off, he's like, you think the Conservatives win? You're like, yeah. And then you walk into New World Order, WEF, all these different things. So you're almost black-pilled then, somewhat.
I think so, yeah, which is I'm like, scared of, I think, but...
I assume I'm not putting you at a place when I say you're kind of like the rest of us. And like 4 months ago, you're like, holy man, we're going to have a super majority. Now the question is, will Pierre do what he says he's going to do? That's the question. Or is he compromised, and is he going to take us closer to this WEF world and everything that way, right? It's like, it's done, it's over. And then walk in Carney, and you're like, where did this happen? And why are they doing it right now? And why is he running? And then you see the polls start to flip, and you're like, what is going on? Donald Trump enters the picture. Donald Trump says the other day, which I actually love, I'd rather deal with a liberal government anyways. And the Fox News host is like, are you sure?
Yeah. What are you talking
He's
about?
like, yeah. The other guy. I'm like, oh man, I'd hate to be a liberal voter the next day watching that and trying to put that math together in their head.
Oh, but they are. Oh my gosh, the comments of people there. I swear, it's like, if you are a liberal, there is no wrong that could ever happen. You will always find a way for it to make sense and for it to...
So what's the best theory you've got or you've seen of people trying to put together Donald Trump's comments from the liberal point of view?
Okay, so I have a few that are very funny. Also, sorry, you can definitely hear my dog barking, but I can't shut her up, so we're just gonna let her do her thing right now. But
isn't the first time.
So there's two things that are hilarious. One of them is people are now saying that Trump and Poilievre have conspired with each other, and this just signals that they are that much more in bed with selling Canada or something, which I just think I'm like, wow, alrighty then. And also too, you go from how many months of saying, well, we take Donald Trump at his word, except for this time. We're not taking him at his word. He definitely has a plan here, but he didn't before. No. It's just right now he does though, because we know that this looks bad for us. So that's just ridiculous. But then the other one that I've heard that's really interesting is because, my interpretation of that, two things. One, is this some crazy reverse psychology? Possibly. Two, does he actually feel that way? Probably. And I don't necessarily know that it's because Pierre Poilievre has been so mean to him as he says. I don't think that that's true, because you know what, he says that, and then in the same comment he also says how the liberals are so nasty. So I'm like, okay, well, which one is it here? But I've also heard a lot of people say that this is really good news, and this is exactly why we need to vote for Mark Carney, because he's going to be the one who's going to get a fair deal with Donald Trump. And I'm like, what does a fair deal mean to you, though? Because, if you think about past history, which is the best way to predict what's to come in the future, Mark Carney has long been selling out anybody for his own financial interests. That's well documented. Pierre Poilievre hasn't at all, really. Oh, yeah, he's a career politician. Alrighty then. I still don't. I'm like, yeah, great. The dude has been reelected how many times? He's remained in politics since he was young. And it's also just goes to show their lack of education, because there's so many people in the Liberal Party that first got involved in politics when they were far younger than Poilievre. So I just think that that's always funny. But it's crazy the pretzels people will spin themselves into in order to justify it and make it make sense and look promising. And then they just write you off as being Russian propaganda or MAGA. I'm like, what? I'm so, honestly, when it comes to politics right now, I am just praying for a world where we can go back to using insults that all of us know instead of regurgitating insults that we heard 3 weeks ago. That would be great.
What do you mean by that? When you say insults we just heard 3 weeks ago? You're probably going to say it and I'll be like, oh.
just like the mass indoctrination, like, and I don't mean to say that to sound super crazy, but also, again, it's well documented. Go read up some statistics and facts when it comes to media psyops and stuff, and there's a lot of pieces to pick apart that you can check. Yep, that's happening here in Canada. But just even, the term career politician, nobody said that at all. And then all of a sudden, mainstream media started saying career politician. And then the liberals started saying career politician. And now 16-year-olds call Pierre Poilievre a career politician. It's so annoying. And I'm like, that's not like, why, if that is an insult that's in your vocabulary, why haven't you used that for literally everybody? Like, Karina Gould was first elected not into parliament, but she was elected in a government position when she was 23. Poilievre was when he was 25. Where was all the career politician slams at Karina Gould during the leadership race, or even, funded by Russia? Again, another thing is put into place by the Trudeau government, exacerbated by the media. The Hogue report comes out and says, no, Russia isn't even in the top 3 of people we're concerned about, but people are still saying, oh, you want your rubles? This is a Russian propaganda account. I'm like, this is insane. Like, just these insults that people never used, that they say to win an argument or to shut you up, that nobody ever heard of or used before. Even, here's another one. I don't know if you've heard this. This is new for me. People calling you a smooth brain, which is essentially saying that you're dumb, like your brain is smooth. Same thing. I swear I heard that like one time on a video that went viral, and everybody says it now. Come on. Can we just get back to the OG of calling people stupid when they're stupid, instead of having all these weird talking point lines to shut people up? I'm just so tired of that. I'm so tired of it. So I'm praying that an election maybe will eliminate some of the woke mind virus in this country, but I'm not very hopeful.
Yeah. I don't know if you're going to get much hope out of me. I got certainly people have been on who think conservatives are going to win, and life is going to carry on and certainly take different twists and turns with a Pierre in. But there's a growing part of the population on this side. One is Carney winning or Liberals winning is the best possible thing, because the only way to fix the country is by Alberta leaving. Mm-hmm. That's one thought process. The other one that is if you go down the rabbit holes and you think about 2020, was it a stolen election in the US? Was COVID man-made, released, down that rabbit hole? Wherever you slide on these, you look at Carney and you go, well, he's the epitome of what that all adds up to. Mm-hmm. And him being put in as the Prime Minister of Canada, I think Canadians are naive. I think I'm naive to think that isn't exactly their hand that they're playing right in front of us. Now, can we know that for sure? No, I can't. They did knock off 250,000 Liberal votes the night before.
With no explanation either, which is interesting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And then you also have a leadership race as well. You knock out every other candidate with reasons that don't really make sense. To be honest, foreign interference at this point in time, I'm just irritated by hearing it. I'm like, listen, if you wanted to do foreign interference, right, maybe you shouldn't have paid off the Hogue reports to say that there wasn't any corruption, because it was all on your end then. I don't believe anything about foreign interference at this point. Obviously it exists, duh. But I'm saying in the way that it's used, and it's always used at conservatives, never the other way around. And so you have Ruby Dalla and then that other dude who, Chandra Arya, I think is his name, who both get removed. And they're removed for both reasons that have to do with some sort of an interference, was the official reason, or something that had to do with some of their accounts that are voting for them. Which is funny because, I went through Mark Carney's donation list, and the one thing that they said with Ruby Dalla was that she had too many people who donated that were from the same family, that's not against the rules, by the way, because you could have, a husband and wife who are both members who vote. That's legal. But for some reason with Ruby Dalla, it wasn't. And if you look into Mark Carney as an example from the documents that I saw, he had the Bronfman family, who has long been accused of having their overseas tax havens. The Bronfman family has been involved in so many big scandals over the years. They're a very powerful family that a lot of people don't know about. They're the daughter, or would it be the niece perhaps, of the two eldest surviving members of the family as well. She was involved in that Nexium cult. They've been involved in a lot of really crazy stuff. And you had multiple people with different names from the Bronfman family donating to Mark Carney, which just right off the hop sounds crazy to me. They've long supported Liberals, though. Don't get me wrong. They also donated to Trudeau's campaign. But the point I'm getting at here is, if you go through the donation list for everybody else, there's certainly people from the same family that donated, right? And it was totally fine. So you go and you whip off these other two people, and then you're left with a leader where the cabinet, excluding Karina Gould, I think she's the only one, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember if is Bayless on Mark Carney's camp. I don't remember if he was renewed a position or not, but either way. So you end up having Mark Carney win, and he adds, like Chrystia Freeland, all the same people from Trudeau's cabinet. We're so different, though. And even Karina Gould, prior to it, said that she was going to have every single one of them on. I'm like, that's not a leadership race then. If every single one of you already has backdoor deals with each other, no matter who it is that wins, you're all going to still be there. Like, that's not how that should work. Sure, is it legal? Yes. But just because it's legal doesn't make it ethical or moral. So I really, the Mark Carney stuff, it scares me a lot. I will be honest there. And it scares me a lot because there's so many people, far too many people, who do not take their time to research things. And it is bizarre to me how people will defend things that are clearly unacceptable. And again, sure, is it legal? Okay. But just because it's legal, because rules haven't been changed for years that they clearly exploited, doesn't make it right. And people should be upset about that in and of itself. Like that aspect scares the hell out of me.
This is why I'm becoming probably cynical, is because everything that we watched happen with the Liberal leadership race, right? Not Gould, the dude, and then Ruby, happened in the Conservative leadership race. I literally sat in this studio with Joseph Bourgault and Theo Fleury the day of them hitting signatures and money to run in that leadership race. Did they ever run? No, because Conservatives X'd them. And then another guy who's been in the studio, Grant Abraham, same thing. And what is the common thread there? They probably not going to be controlled. It would be my just simple way of putting, they're going to talk about some things that I would argue the Conservatives, whether they don't want it talked about or maybe from a political mindset, believe it wouldn't appeal to the voter base or to Canadians as a whole, that it would smear them as, I don't know, conspiracy theorists or whatever the going trend in the narrative is. So both sides are doing the same thing. And we've seen it provincially with different people here for certain, once again, for the UCP, in my eyes, current government, removed certain people that I've had on the show that I'm like, I think you'd be a heck of a candidate. Holy Mackinac. Why don't they want you in there? Right? Like, and you watch the Liberals do the same thing. Why is that? Why Ruby? And, they point to India influencing it. You're like, oh, that's the low-hanging fruit, folks. That's the easy one. Meanwhile, we got at least 11 MPs. We still don't know who they are. And, they're just
I also think
carry on with life.
I think in the case of Ruby there too, and this is me just, I don't know, maybe playing devil's advocate a tad or not. It's very interesting how the same party that welcomes immigration and is so pro all of the compassion in the world, the second that they need to use a card like that in order to shut people up and shut them down, they do. And they've done that plenty of times, actually. And it's just really interesting to me how, they go and say, and it's not like Ruby, as far as she is documented, hasn't received any evidence of their claims. And so they just go and, oh, it's India. I'm like, well, that actually sounds kind of racist. Just going to throw that out there, which I thought you guys hated. But okay, cool. I think that, it's so hard to say. Like, obviously, I would prefer if the Conservatives won. I like a lot of their messaging. I like a lot of their platform. I would like to think that our economy would do better with them. I like to think that they aren't as involved in the elite establishment, but also there has been some things that have happened over the years, and you also just never really know. So it's tough, and I think again that kind of goes to show like just how bad our political landscape is. That there's been so many things that have actually happened and proven that even when something isn't, it's like your mind will speculate still and put pieces together because, well, that's a real possibility, right? And that just really, really sucks for all of us ahead of this election. But I certainly think anybody, at least, who is planning to vote Liberal, I don't know. I guess we need to pray for them a lot, because I don't know how. There's so much of this information that I have, and I've done so many deep dives on Mark Carney. I've been familiar with Mark Carney for such a long time. And I was warning about him back in 2020, even when it was first announced that it was on paper, at least, that he was advising the Trudeau government. I remember having conversations with my mom about him. My mom's really liberal, by the way, like a loyal liberal. She's really supportive of everything that I do, though. But
what was it back in 2020? I find this interesting because, like, I always say on this side, I have I don't know, sympathy is probably the right word for a lot of people, because, like, up until 2021, I was the guy who was still, I'm still a diehard Oilers fan. Sorry, folks. I still love the Oilers.
Hey, the Oilers is the only jersey I own. So they haven't been good since 96, but I still love them. I have a signed Lay's chip bag from Mark Messier. It's in a glass box. I'm not even joking.
That's a cool story. And that's that's a signed Lay's chip bag. Okay.
Well, he was the sponsor or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. He was the Lay's guy. Yeah, I don't even know where I was going.
I totally lost your train. I'm sorry.
You got me with Lay's chips. I'm thinking, I wonder what 20-year-old, or, well, not more than that, almost 30-year-old Lay's chips taste like. Probably not great.
No, maybe they taste amazing though. They're probably
they're signed by Mark Messier.
Yeah. Silliest story ever. You were talking about being cynical. 2020, what happened in 2020?
Oh my God, thank you. This is what a good radio host does. It's like Shaun's got his train and it just like stopped and did a train.
I got you.
I was saying 2021, I was the dummy. So when you come along for all these things, it's like I have a lot of time for people who are just catching up or still kind of asleep. I mean, I'm having a harder time with it every day because I'm like, really? Not now? Come on. But in fairness, I'm sure there was people back in like 2018 that were like, Shaun, really? Really? But Mark Carney, I sit here. We have a book club. We talk about a lot of things. Mark Carney was on zero people's radar, at least in our world. Mm-hmm. What was it back then, or in your research, that when you saw Mark Carney, you're like, holy crap, this guy?
Well, I'm so happy you said that. So I would say some of the biggest red flags that I have, I may have the year wrong by a year, possibly, if you go and fact check me, but I believe it was in 2017. Mark Carney had first started publishing papers and doing interviews and things like that about central banking digital currencies. And they were saying that all those things were going to be so great for the economy. Oh, one economy, blah, blah, blah. But with central banking digital currencies, obviously, we've seen how that works in history when governments have control over the economy. It doesn't work out so well. Now, does it? In fact, you don't even have to go that far back. Historically, there are nations alive and well today. Alive, I don't know about well, who are in those predicaments, and it has been horrendous for them. Example being in North Korea, did you know that the average height of a grown human is typically below 5 feet? And the reason for that is due to decades of malnutrition in their genetics, that they just simply are not as tall as people elsewhere are. Why do they have that problem? Because the government is in full control of their money. It is in full control of their life. And they proposed the exact same idea many years ago. And similarly too, say, this is going to be great. Yeah, you won't have any more responsibilities anymore. You're just going to live your life. It's going to be great. Yeah, we'll have jobs for you. We'll make sure you have everything that you need. That's never, ever how the story ends, though. So that was a really big red flag for sure. And then around the same time frame, I believe it was about a year or so after that, Mark Carney, he was also involved in the Glasgow Net Zero Alliance. That's not the full name of it. I'm missing a word in there. And net zero is something that is horrible, absolutely catastrophic, and absolutely it's impossible as well. And it literally is one of those things where, and here's probably why I really started investigating Mark Carney so much, because I became very curious as to, we've suddenly heard in recent years. I recall when I was younger, I remember my mom telling me, oh yeah, in 2000, all of the technology was supposed to be wiped out. In 97, they told us that by 97, there wasn't going to be enough food to feed the world because of climate change. Everybody was going to starve to death. There's published papers that you can find in archives about this stuff from 30 years prior to those dates. And none of those things ever came true. And it got me down this rabbit hole of thinking, well, who is it exactly that is pushing for this stuff? Because when I'm just out on the street, I never ever hear people talking about climate change. I never hear people talking about net zero, carbon neutrality. I never hear those things. And I'm looking around and, there was a wildfire by my cabin a number of years ago, and it's grown back beautifully. And it's just this lush, beautiful area that's totally replenished. And you would think if there wasn't enough plant food out there that the forest would have just disappeared. It would be nothing. It'd be a wasteland. And that's not the case. And you have other forests in the world that continue to expand. They're growing like crazy. Well, if carbon is so bad, why are all of these things happening? And who's telling us that these things are bad? And that was when I started to learn that oftentimes, or not oftentimes, since the beginning of time, the people pushing for these things are all people who are involved with the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. There's a number of countries in the EU as well. And then there's a couple of other organizations that have been around for decades that have been pushing these exact same things. And again, every single one of their predictions has been false. And nobody fact checks them on that. Nobody critiques them for that. They come around and they say the exact same crap that they've been saying to us on the world stage for how many years? And nobody says anything like, oh, that's weird that you're still pushing for this because, well, it hasn't happened. And it's also a lot of government elites, political lobbyists, registered or unregistered. I personally classify Mark Carney as an unregistered political lobbyist. I mean, if you think about all of his investments in climate and whatever, obviously, and even there was a clip going viral of him from a conference that he had in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, where he had been pushing for green fuel for planes, where essentially the organization that he was involved in had pressured companies, some of which in America, some of which have actually since sued, by saying that all of these other airlines were going to be making it a requirement that you have a certain percentage of your fuel that is green sourced, whatever that means. And so companies they invested billions of dollars into it. And lo and behold, we're at a position in the world where that hasn't really come true to full fruition the way that they were told that it was going to. So they essentially lied, either intentionally or unintentionally, because they're just so ideologically driven and they really believe this stuff, that all of these businesses were going to have to change course to allow for green things to happen. And it costs tons of money. And none of that stuff actually happened. And so when you think about the fact that there's so many people out there who are pushing for these things that have been pushed for decades, that aren't pushed by everyday citizens, and they never were until the government and the media started talking about it. That was the only time that everyday citizens started feeling afraid, like I did when I saw Al Gore all those years ago, when people talked about these things. And so, I just feel like there's so many little rabbit holes to go down. And then even recently, you hear Mark Carney talking about carbon credits. Carbon credits is something Mark Carney has been talking about since, probably 2017, 2018 or something. And it is essentially that in order to emit carbon as a big polluter, and this is something he said he wants to bring into Canada. He said this, I think it was 3 days ago, 3 or 4 days ago, he said this on stage. It essentially means that you have to pay in order to emit the carbon that your machinery or your plane is emitting. And those things, if you actually look at the models, they always present them as being so good for everybody. And they're not at all, actually. They're very good for the elite who can afford them. And they're absolutely devastating for people who cannot. And, even too, you think about Mark Carney and the carbon tax and all these things. And it's like, what is as an example, I actually did the math on this morning. So Mark Carney, if he took just 2 private jet trips a year, or 8 regular aircraft trips a year. Let's be real. He says he doesn't fly private. I literally watched him walk off the steps of a private plane when he was in the UK. So, okay. But so if he were to fly 2 private trips a year, he would actually emit in those 2 flights alone more carbon into the atmosphere, if that's the scary thing we're talking about, than the average human would in 8 to 10 years of their life. And if he flew, and that is also comparable to just a regular aircraft where it was 10 to 15 flights, depending on the aircraft, it'd be the same as 8 to 10 years of you and me and our lifetimes. And, you just look at those numbers and to me too, I'm like, well, I'll start believing it when you start believing it, I guess, because you're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to lead by example. You're not doing that. So clearly it's not a big threat, right? If it was actually this huge existential crisis, why would you take a random trip to the UK to talk with all of these other people from the WEF and from the UN, even though Justin Trudeau and Melanie Joly were just there a week and a half ago to do the exact same talks? It doesn't make any sense. And also too, sorry, I'm on a rant now. They always say with net zero, we have to achieve net zero. Well, what exactly does that mean? Number one, it's nearly impossible to achieve. Number two, net zero would cost the average government trillions of dollars a year. Trillions of dollars. And the end result of it is nothing really, because it actually doesn't really do anything. If you start to go through all of that data, it doesn't do anything. To lower the climate, we want it to be 1 degree colder than it is right now. And I'm like, well, what happened to the ice age you were telling us about in the 50s? That never happened. And then it was global warming. And now apparently carbon's the big problem. And then I heard something again recently. Oh, it might be another ice age. I'm like, this is a total scam. This is a total scam. And we have decades of history to prove that. And Mark Carney has been somebody very involved at the highest level with all of these things. And to hear him reiterating some of the same comments that I've read about him in reports that he's been a part of and groups that he's been a part of in the past, it's just like, wow, Canadians, you have been horribly fooled. And I'm terrified for our future if you do not wake up to what this man actually wants to do. End rant. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I enjoyed it. Parts of it, I'm like, the thing that comes to mind is rules for thee and not for me.
100%.
And what are the things that we talk about with COVID? The thing that just literally happened is like all these rules, you can't get together. And then hearing Alberta, what was the beginning of the end? Maybe Albertans are going to tell me what the beginning of the end was, but the rooftop palace, the dinner, them drinking wine all together with no masks on. Meanwhile, we're supposed to not be around each other, and and none of it made sense. And we lived life for like that, and it was insane.
And they do it by fear. They make you feel scared, and there's a lot of people in on that make you feel scared. And I'm not at the point either where I have absolutely no trust in any government. I'm not there. I believe that there are a lot of really good people with really good intentions who work jobs like that, who are told information that isn't accurate by people who they really trust and respect, and that can kind of sway them. So I'm not at a point where I completely distrust the government, but man, I completely distrust the elitists, the globalists. I need the WEF to get wrecked. I need them out of my life.
I'm quite convinced. Is there great people in every industry, 110%. But the machine is a machine for a reason, and the bureaucracy of the machine is there for a reason. And when you look at anything the government touches, it just they can have the greatest ideas, but when they implement it, it goes south. Whether it's right now or in 5 or 10 years when a different group comes in and uses the same tool that was, we look at Doge, we look at the things going on in the United States. I think it's amazing. They're getting rid of a ton of spend. What do people warn about? Well, the technocracy that's sliding in behind it. And you go, well, no. So then you get in the argument. Well, were they not supposed to do anything? Or what are you trying to say here? It's like, oh, it's just in 10 years, will we have the same thoughts? Like, when you look at, when you go back to 9/11, and I'm not here to get down that rabbit hole, folks, just that, the Patriot Act and all the different things that came in with that. Back then, you're like, oh, thank God they're searching us and making sure they're safe and nobody's stealing planes or bringing bombs on. Now it's like, oh my God, to go through an airport, it's insanity. It's literally like, does any of this make sense anymore? We're just being herded like cattle at times, and then when COVID hit, I mean, really, your points of leaving a country here in Canada specifically, they just rolled up all the international airports. Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, maybe 3 for sure. So, and if you're anywhere in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you're flying through Calgary. Well, I mean, you choke out the exit points, right? And start to do things like that. You're like, this is the hard thing about looking what's going on and trying to understand where we're being led to. And then try and get through all the division that's being created on top of all that. And it's like these conversations are uber important. Like, it's super cool to see people such as yourself and others that I get to have on the show, just like coming out of nowhere. In my mind, nowhere. I've already heard your story, and I'm like, oh, you did
no
not come
offense
out.
taken. Don't worry.
But you didn't come out of nowhere. In Canada, I'm just like, where are all these voices? And one of the things I hope I'm doing on the show is we get to promote them, right? We get to bring them on. I'm like, oh man, this is cool. We found another one, folks. And like, it's really, really important for people to wrestle with these things, because it's not just like, I don't know, simple. I wish it was. It's so complex, all these different things going on.
And there's lots of
psyops.
nuance. There's lots of nuance and details, and it's easy to go down rabbit holes that are dead leads, and there's just so much. The psyops is a big one. That's something I'm big on researching right now. I'm hoping to have a video that is much deeper into that in the coming weeks, because that has just been a trip and a half. And I swear it's like, now I sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but mark my words, I will end up being right.
Hard to do that on this side. When you talk psyops, what's the crazy, like, you're like, I don't know, maybe you didn't know, or maybe you had a feeling, but then you start digging into it. When you talk psyops, what sticks out to you, or what's you're like, man, people are gonna go.
I'd say the biggest things has just been and I talk about this a lot, and people call me crazy, and I don't care, because I'm very confident in my beliefs with this. And I also do what I can to ground myself as well. Like, when I hear something that's really crazy, I will do everything that I possibly can to convince myself that it is crazy before I'll actually admit it out loud what it was that I found. And so with psyops, here we'll use this as just a lame example, but CBC as an example, it's been funded by the federal government since its creation, right? However, in more recent years. So when Harper was running, he had announced that he was going to be decreasing the funding of the CBC by about 150 million, I think it was. And when Justin Trudeau was running to replace him, he said that he was going to increase the funding of the CBC. I think it would take a special kind of idiot to not think in the slightest that whoever pays your bills is somebody that you don't want to upset, right? That's why we don't blow up at our bosses when they say things that make us mad often. And so the CBC became unbelievably left leaning after Justin Trudeau increased all of that funding. And then he also introduced a new Broadcast Act, which gave them extra funding in 2018. And we have seen the evolution of how much more biased they have become as a result of that. The CBC has always had some sort of a political bias, for the record. It's usually been more left leaning, but back in the 90s, their trustworthiness ratings were definitely much more center than what they are today. And today you see, I was looking at a graph recently where it said it was like 70% of Canadians think that media in Canada, mainstream media, has a bias to the point where they actually don't really trust it and they're going to see other sources. And so you see things sometimes, and it's always these little details, and they're little details because you don't notice them, but they have an impact on your emotion and they have an impact on your takeaway of a certain story. So this is probably a silly example, but just yesterday, CTV News had posted an article that said something to the effect that the headline was immigration lawyer warns Canadians traveling to the US amid tariff war. When you hear that, the takeaway there is, oh, okay, so wow, it must be really hard to be a Canadian traveling to the US right now. The US is obviously cracking down on even tourists. I should cancel my trip to Florida with my kids to take them to Disney World. But then when you read the article is actually about people who have permanent residency, people who are on different visas and stuff. There was that story that came out recently of that young woman who was detained by ICE, which was very bizarre. We haven't seen something like that ever, I think. And so that was the contents of the story, but the headline of the story left you with a different impression that this was going to affect me and it's something that I need to be afraid of. And you see little things like that where it's disingenuous and it's intentionally disingenuous. It really is. And you'll see media, there's been some wonderful examples of this, especially in the United States, where you will have several different news personalities, accounts, stuff like that will publish something and it's the exact same copy and pasted wording. That's bizarre. You have had videos coming out of reporters on their personal pages and things like that, where they are telling a story casually to the camera. And there will be several others who told the exact same story casually to their camera. That's bizarre. And that's not normal. You can't chalk that up to a weird coincidence over a breaking news story. Like, you just can't. One or two, okay, maybe. One or two that happens every 10 years. Yeah, okay, maybe. They just happen to have the exact same take and the exact same wordage. But there's so many little details like that. And one thing that I've really noticed in Canadian media is the play on your emotion. So there will almost always in stories be some sort of an emotional trigger, either to make you feel afraid or worried, to make you feel angry, like you resent the US. And moreover, we're seeing this a lot now with the tariff situation, where so many headlines and so many stories are starting with things like more and more Canadians are choosing to boycott the US. Oh, the what is that called? The border, what is that called? When you get to the border?
Customs?
Yeah, there we go. Has reported seeing 5,000 less Canadians entering the country than usual. And what do those things do is Canadians and people as a whole are very much, we're herd mentality. That's how we have survived, right? Most people have insecurities and they don't want to be the odd one out, which is why this type of stuff works so well to manipulate their school of thought and their takeaway without them even realizing that it's been happening. And that's something that governments have been involved in for decades. And so the reason why they have things written that way is because it's supposed to make you feel ashamed if you were one of the people who decided that you were still going to go to the US. And it's supposed to make you feel like you're a bit of an outsider if everybody else is doing something and you're not, or vice versa. And there's just so many little things like that I pick up on, that I've, again, researched at length in terms of like the PSYOP playbook that has been used for decades in Canada and the US and around the globe. So many things like that. And they're so small, you would never, ever notice them. But after you hear certain messages after a period of time, it is actually incredibly easy to permeate that portion of your brain. It's incredibly easy to do so. and it's very scary. And I've seen so many things like that, especially amid this Trump tariff war. I was seeing it beforehand as well, but especially now, it's in almost every day. There's one of those little messages where if you dig deeper, the story isn't about what the message is, or it's worded in a way that's meant to invoke some sort of fear or reaction or herd mentality. And that stuff's really scary. And I fully believe that they absolutely do it on purpose. And that's why you have so many people who have no idea what's actually going on, and they will proudly throw out these political talking points and feel like they've won a conversation, even though they failed to actually investigate what it is that they're talking about.
Well, I was going to say no shame on this side. Hey, folks, like, I mean, we got a bunch of people who definitely don't conform to the patterns of society.
I have a question for you, actually.
Yeah,
I was talking about this with one of my friends who does a podcast out in Nova Scotia. And I had said to him, with so much of the rhetoric lately, I have days where I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, so is everybody else right? And am I just absolutely radicalized? Because there's so many people who have such a different takeaway from this than I do. But then I go and I read through all of the information again, and I'm like, no, I still have the same takeaway. And I try so hard to see their side of it, and I just don't. Do you ever feel that way sometimes? Like, because isn't it just so bizarre that there's
like,
so
maybe
many
I'm losing my
people?
mind.
Yeah. Like, it's
The answer is
crazy.
yes.
Okay. At least I'm not alone.
and yet then, I remember a Jordan Peterson interview, and I forget the person that was interviewing him, but she was asking almost that identical question. Like, why don't people see this? And he's like, well, for one, you're a journalist. And so a journalist is going to find things before anyone else finds them. That's your entire purpose of a job. You're the tip of the spear, if you would. And a lot of the things, that you've talked about, even Carney, think about that. Think about bringing him up back in 2020, being like, oh my God, Carney's there. I would have been like, who?
Yeah.
And I
listen, even 4 months ago, most Canadians would have been like, who?
Right. It's like they can't see. So it's a unique skill that you have, right? You can read things and then see where it leads. Imagine being Aldous Huxley, right? Is it Huxley or is it who wrote 1984? Why am I spacing on the name? Is it Huxley? It doesn't feel right. George Orwell. Oh,
yes, thank you.
Huxley's Brave New World.
Oh, that's such a good Amazon TV series.
So George Orwell writes 1984. And if you read that back in the 40s, you're like, what is this guy smoking? And yet we read it now and you're like, oh my God. Or I think of Atlas Shrugged with Ayn Rand, and I read it and I'm like, this is exactly what's happening right now. Go read some C.S. Lewis, and he has essays where it literally paints where we are.
I actually have a book of his essays in the background of
C.S.
this.
Lewis?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
I've been reading. I've never read Narnia, but I've read almost everything else by him since I was quite young.
Me and Jasmin are quickly becoming best friends, I think. So when you talk about, I go back to the Jordan Peterson interview, and he's just like, that you're there and doing what you're doing because you're going to find it faster than everybody. And everybody else is playing catch up if they're playing at all. So if they're not playing, if they're just going to the Oilers game or watching the Four Nations Cup, or just take your list of other things. And I sit where I sit. I have 3 young kids, married. I got a beautiful life away from all of this. Right. And if you get just trapped, not even trapped in the sense like trapped, but just like you get so busy where you're running, you just can't, you're like, I can't take any more information. Those days happen to me, and this is my job.
Yeah, same.
I can see how you can listen to someone like, you are losing your top, And so when you ask that question, sitting here, yes. Is it once a month? Is it once a week? It's somewhere in between, I would say. Like, oh my God, have I lost my mind? And then I go back and I start doing I call it addition. It's like, no, that happened. And then that happened. Did that actually happen? Like, did that? Yeah, that happened, Shaun. Okay. Then I get back to where I'm at. And it's like, Mark Carney I haven't had one person come on the show and go, Mark Carney's exactly what we need. He's a globalist, elitist, all these lovely words. He's going to get us out of this. It's going to be amazing. I'm like, nope, no, that's not true at all. So no, yes, your question and my long way around it is yes. I think if you sit in these chairs and do these conversations, it's hard not to at times get to conclusions that may never happen because
Mhm.
these conversations are happening,
Mhm.
right? When journalism is happening, like true journalism is breaking stories and talking about things, it alters the course of where a narrative is going. It's hard not to, right?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
it's seeing the pushback from the other side that's really interesting,
If I
right?
can be honest, it's one of the reasons why, and again, this is through so much research and even talking with friends of mine who have come here from really not great countries,
Sure.
like the one I told the story about earlier. It's one of the reasons why I absolutely resent social programs in the degree that they are applied right now and encouraged and pushed, because I think that exactly as my friend had said, when you become too dependent on those things, you stop becoming critical and you stop thinking and you stop caring, because this is what's keeping you afloat right now. And there's all sorts of things that the government rolls out that absolutely, yeah, that's great. People need it. Sure. Great. Love that. Well, we can't afford it though. Our grandchildren's grandchildren are going to be paying it off. So that's a major red flag. And nobody, instead of just saying, oh, this is awesome, I have this extra help, why is nobody asking, why do we need this? What? Like, my grandparents survived and they had a ton of kids and they didn't have $10 a day childcare. They were fine. They didn't have a school food program. They were fine. Like, and these things, again, I understand. And I'm very compassionate, and people even on my show get upset with me sometimes when I try to ration things out, because I absolutely understand that there are so many people who are underserved. And there's a lot of people who are really struggling, and I would give everything I could to make them get out of that hole. But you also aren't responsible for what is happening in someone else's life. If there's something you can do where there is actually going to be a path that they can pull themselves out of because they want to pull themselves out of that, I love that. I think that that's great, and we should always support that. But if you are putting things in place solely to get votes at the expense of the rest of your country because of the increased taxes, and also, at the expense of the people who do really need it. I mean, $10 a day childcare is a great example. You had wait times that were once an average of 2 to 3 years, which are now over 6 years. So by the time that you get it, your kid doesn't need it anymore in most cases. And I think about things like that. And even myself, I have plenty of friends, I have nephews and everything too, who, like, my friends and family will tell me, then they'll complain about how annoying it is that there's like stay-at-home moms who will utilize that $10 a day daycare because they just want a day for themselves, which, okay, cool. I get it, I guess, kind of. Not really, actually. I don't know. I love kids, so it's hard. I'm like, even if they're screaming in my face, I'd love hanging out
Well,
with them.
well, you're hitting on, so like one of the probably monumental issues we have in Canada is one of, like, you know, it's not easy to fix, and that is, um, we look to the government to solve all of our problems,
Mhm.
right? So, like, you go back to the story you're telling. At one point, you got married and you had kids, and one person stayed home. Now, was it always the woman? On the vast majority, yes, but, like,
Mhm.
you can argue about that all you want. And that's what life was. It was
Mhm.
very focused on the family, and you had, when you're talking 10 kids in different families like that, there's a lot of that was farming background. Why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory to what your lifestyle was and what you were doing, and probably
Mhm.
some of your values there. And as we fast forwarded, now, like, one kid families, maybe, like our birth rate is declining. And part of that is not because people don't want to have kids, it's because it's expensive. And
Mhm.
like, life in Canada has become like this, like, you go to the grocery store and you come home, you're like, that's what I got. That's what I got. Okay. Right. And
Mhm.
yet, we're giving $10 a day daycare. That's going to fix everything. We got, what was the dental care for people
Mhm.
in their later life. You're like, that's what we're worried about. Like, to me, when you mentioned the story earlier about the 5,000, they've seen a decline in people going to the States. like, well, the obvious answer is look at our dollar.
I know.
To go to the United States has nothing to do with I hate the United States. It's like, I can't afford to go there. And that's what I hate about mainstream media. It's like, it's just low-hanging fruit where you could actually talk to the story. Is the fact that our dollar is absolutely in the toilet. And we can't afford to do anything as Canadians. We're literally, like our money is becoming monopoly money. Truly. It's just not going to buy you anything. And so I agree with you. I guess when I come back to it, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. It's the reason why I got into podcasting in a weird way. And like, clean your room, not the easiest thing to do. It is and it isn't. But then, like, you do that if you're married, then you got to start looking at your relationships and then your kids and your house. And if we all did that here in Canada, we'd have a wild, wild place to live again.
Yeah.
But sadly, that's not the value system of what's been pushed on our population or what they want. Just your story about, I'm going to take $10 a day so I can have a day away from my kids. It's like, I understand having a break, but taking taxpayers' money to have a break, like, that doesn't even
well,
make
and two,
sense.
it's like at the expense of somebody else who actually maybe really, really needs it, a single mom, let's say. And of course, it's hard to weed out each and every case, but I've heard so many stories like that about so many different things, and people are always going to take advantage of a system, but you can only take advantage of a system if there are ways for you to take advantage of it, right? So, these things, like I said, it's like I love everybody and I want everybody to have the most amazing life imaginable. And if there's something somebody else can do that's going to help you achieve that, I think that's the most beautiful thing. And that's the highest aim any of us can have here on earth in some degree. But the way that things are rolled out, the way that how much they cost and all these things, it's not good in the grand scheme of things. I have something, you said something about childcare that I don't know, it just brought up a story that I feel like more people need to hear. Am I allowed to go off for a second?
No, that's it, folks. We're done for today.
So in Canada, we have very, very low birth rates for natural born citizens, right? That's why we have such high mass immigration. And now we're at a point where natural born citizens can't find a job and there's a lot of problems, or house. But are you familiar with what they did in Hungary?
Yes. I guess define well. I understand what they did, but maybe you shock me here this morning.
Okay. So in Hungary, I can't remember what year this was. It was like within the last decade or so, though. Their conservative party was very right-leaning and they were very anti-abortion because if I'm allowed to say those words on here, because they
Jasmin, on this side of the world, you're allowed to say whatever you want.
Okay. So they were very, very
just before you carry on with your
Yes.
story, this is the state of Canada. You say the word abortion and heads explode. And you're like, it's just a word. You're just like, folks, this has been created for us. I know I'm talking to the choir because my audience is fantastic. They're just like, they probably want me to steer harder into certain subjects by now. And carry on. Hungry.
Okay, well, we can get to those after. So in Hungary, they had a very right-leaning conservative government that was very anti-abortion and very pro-family. And they knew that saying that out loud to the public was not going to win them the election, but their country had some of the lowest birth rates in the world, the lowest fertility rates, it was just really bad. And the Conservative Party out there really did not want to replace their population by importing residents from elsewhere. So what they decided to do instead of running on, we're banning abortion. And I honestly feel like so many other countries should know this and should maybe try to implement something similar, because that is a crisis that many nations are facing right now. So they decided to run on having these massive benefits for people who had families instead. Where, if you were a mother with up to 4 children, you had lifetime that you no longer had to pay your personal income tax. If you were a family of 2, there were insane write-offs that you had, insane tax incentives. It was just unbelievable what they did. And it wasn't, and abortion was still legal in the country to have, if to my knowledge, it still is today. But the way that they positioned it was just really pro-family. They give a baby bonus. And like, these are things too, where like every time you have a kid, you're benefiting from it greatly. And by benefiting from it greatly, you're able to provide your child with a better life than you could have without those benefits. And that's where their tax dollars are going, instead of some of the other wacky stuff that we see out there these days. And it's really fascinating because within about a 6-year period, they're now one of the highest fertility rates in all of Europe. And they are also, their abortions decreased by about 50% as well. And there's so many people now that just have these amazing, wonderful families, and they want to keep having them. And like, their productivity has grown, their population has grown. Some of their statistics are still lower than they should be, but they have shot up immensely since this was first implemented, because it hasn't been that long since this has been in place. And it's just fascinating.
If I may, because just to add to this, mothers with one child, women under 30 who have one child, are eligible for a significant tax-based reduction until they turn 30. This is not a full exemption, but reduces the taxable income, providing financial relief during their 20s. Mothers with 2 children starting January 2026 will receive a lifetime personal income tax exemption. Mothers with 3 from October 2025 also fully exempt paying personal. Mothers with 4 or more since 2020 have been granted a lifetime income tax exemption. I brought this, to me, with a value set, I guess I come with. I'm like, I hear that and I'm like, oh my God.
Genius.
And you go, and somewhere somebody's going, yeah, what about that crappy parent who has 4 kids to get away from paying taxes? I'm sure there will be abuse, just like any government program. But when we go, we all, on this side of things, I think for the most part, we have a ton of time for the family and for kids. I'm like, what a way to show what your values are by rewarding motherhood. That's exactly what that's doing. And in the best possible way, because even, our oldest is about to turn 9. So 9 years ago, 10 years ago, we were having the discussion of, we were watching other couples where the mom was staying home. And the discussion was, well, even if she did go to work, she's basically taking her entire income to pay for childcare. So why don't
my sister is facing that right now? Yeah.
So why don't we just have her stay home, and now she's around the kid? And the other argument was no, we believe in a woman having a career and her mental health, all the things that way, so that they could pay, and it's just like how you value your time and your money and your kids and blah 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 blah. But it's a huge conversation. If the conversation was you could go to work or not, you're just not paying income tax anymore. How many people are like, say that again? I don't have to pay income tax again because I had my 3rd kid, and like, I'm trying to make financial decisions and keep my life on track and balance everything. Like that wouldn't be a sweeping win. Like everybody in the population would be like, heck yes, I'll take that.
Well,
Thoughts on abortion and everything aside, it's just like, it's a brilliant stroke.
I thought it was a really, I was really impressed with that. And also the statistics as they update year by year since they first started rolling this out has just been fascinating. But to that point, bringing it back to Canada, the thing about what they're doing in Hungary is it's all of these incentives for you to make decisions for your life, that the incentive there, it's not a program that you get that everybody else pays for. It's your own personal tax reduction. In most cases, and there's baby bonuses essentially and stuff like that too in there, and housing incentives and whatnot. But it is just beyond me, especially amid this tariff threat. And this is something that I said actually very early on when you had Jagmeet Singh talking about how, oh, well, I'll keep propping up the government and until they finally agree to have some sort of a relief package for workers. And I'm like, why don't you just make workers work for money that makes sense by lowering their taxes? Like, what the hell? I'm sorry. So instead of doing that, You instead need to collect more money from people now so that you can afford to pay this off,
Yes.
plus the debt
We're
that
going to
accrues.
collect your money and we're going to give
Ugh,
it back to you.
it's
'Cause
insane.
that's the way we protect you. This
It's
makes sense.
insane. Yeah,
It's
and I'm
consensus.
tired of that. I'm tired of that. So like with Pierre Poilievre, hoping that he sticks to it. You know, a lot of his conversations lately have been about significantly reducing taxes, and yep, you're absolutely going to feel that a little bit at first until it kind of stabilizes, if that comes to fruition. But I do think that is we absolutely need to get people off of the government dependency, especially people who
Is
don't
that possible?
necessarily. Welfare is very hard to get off of, that
Is
I
that
know. It's
possible?
almost
Think of
impossible.
all the government. You
I
know,
know.
when I think of Canada here, Jasmine, okay, and I'm like, okay, we need a ton of like reform.
Mhm.
Okay, let's use that word. We just need to change some things. And you're like, who's going to vote for that?
I
Like,
will.
I know, but I look at the Liberal government possibly getting back in, and I'm like, who's
Mhm.
voting for that? A huge chunk of the West is not
Yeah.
voting for that.
Mhm.
That is going to be, we all know it's going to be a certain piece of the population, all centered in a couple of certain locations. And we're sitting here and we're like, oh yeah, well, we need to get this in. And I love what Hungary's doing. I think that's brilliant.
The messaging.
Is that ever coming to Canada? Probably not. Why?
No.
Because it's just where this country's at. Okay, so how do you
Yeah.
how do you absolutely rattle the cage and maybe get a different deal? And I keep coming back to this idea. And I think a lot of Albertans who've been maybe influencing my side of the way of thinking, because, I've been living in Alberta now for over a decade, I guess. Wow,
Mhm.
that's, I hadn't really thought about that in a while. And you go, this is the most raucous group of human beings. We got Danielle Smith, who every other province in Canada that's conservative goes, she's doing amazing. Here in Alberta, that's not the case. There's lots of people that want her to do more and different
Mhm.
things and want her to, you go to net zero. Oh, you just anyways, that's in there, and you go, this group of people want something different. And the longer I stare at this system called Canada, I'm like, the only way is you got to get out of it at some point
Mhm.
to renegotiate or to break it up so that people will actually get out of this funk of like the government of Canada is here to save us, or the government of anything is here to save. It's just like this is hard. This is like, this hurts my brain to watch everybody just be like, well, the government's, they're doing all right. They're
Yeah, I
sticking up
know.
for us. It's like, are you insane? Are we insane here? You asked earlier, do I question? At times I go, what is everybody else drinking
Mhm.
that they are still hooked into the machine? And then I think, at times, one of my brothers will always point this out. I'm no longer controlled. I've been doing this for full time. This will be the third straight year. Yeah, third straight year. So I'm 3 years removed from having an overseer that tells me what I can and cannot say,
Mhm.
or what topic you can and cannot talk about. And the more I become removed from the system, I worry that I'm moving further and further away from that, where I can actually understand the population and what their worries are.
Mhm.
Because I watch it, I'm just like, this is like, let's just get out of this, folks. We can do this. We get out of this, and there are brighter days ahead.
I think for myself too, being a younger person I've been conservative for a very long time. I'd say like I went through some phases where I was like, maybe I'm a libertarian, but I'd say now I'm pretty well a conservative through and through. Maybe there's a few things that I'm still a little too compassionate about, but I'm working on those. But there's so many people, especially women, young women, and women naturally we're just so much more sensitive and emotional. And there's been so many times where people will say to me things like, well, how could you be a conservative? Because, that makes you this, and this. Well, that means that you don't care about XYZ and you're promoting this rhetoric and this hatred and division, and which is just ridiculous. But I got to a point, and this was actually not even that. This is probably like within the last year where I finally realized like I have the biggest heart ever, and I have really pure intentions. I am not somebody at all who is driven by my ego. I am not driven by pride. I love to see other people win. And and I love, I guess, just how my life has been set up and the things that I've worked hard on to get to this position, because I have now realized that I can be loving and compassionate and kind, and I can be rational and logical, all while being conservative still. Like I can be all of those things while maintaining my values. And just because what I believe in doesn't jive with whatever the narrative of the day is, or whatever the blue-haired feminists are screaming about, that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person because, I believe in I don't know, conserving the things that are great about us. Yeah, that's whoa. Excuse me for expressing my democratic right for, following a perfectly legal party. So I think that was a really big eye opener too, in terms of making me not feel insane, because people used to throw that at me all the time. People I feel, especially like all of the people who don't like me, and there's definitely less of them than there are people who appreciate what I'm doing, as far as I can tell. But, that would always be one of the top ones. How could you, as a woman? And now I'm like, yeah, you're right. As a woman, I love this. And this is the right path to me. This is where the right aim is. And I've done everything I can. I've spoken with so many people to try to convince myself otherwise, because there's so many of you. And my natural instinct is to want to fit in. And this is the opposite of that in many, especially in Manitoba. But I can't, because I know that it's not true. And I know that my heart is pure and my intentions are pure. And I know that what I'm doing, I'm following whatever that higher aim is, whatever my soul is telling me to do. And I know that that is the best course of action for my life. And yeah, I may be conservative. I may not like having mass immigration in our country. I may not like how much money is wasted on things that seemingly nobody else cares about. But that doesn't make me a bad person at all. And I think I was silly for so long to think that it did, which caused me to not speak out about these things many years before, like when I should have, instead of waiting so long until I finally did, because I always wanted to.
I don't know. Maybe I'm early on this, late on this. I listen to you and I just go, you probably have a very high ceiling or bright career ahead or whatever, as long as Canada doesn't go into like the dark ages under Mark Carney, and then maybe me and you will be sharing a similar prison cell. I'm not 100% sure, like on that.
We'll sneak a phone in or something. We'll still podcast out of there.
That's right. We'll have the morning show from the gulags. Yeah, that's right. Back and forth. I don't know if I should ask this, but what the heck? I've been having. I'm like, I the first time I ever asked this was like 3 years ago with Drew Weatherhead, and at that time I was like, what a taboo question. But I'm like, heck, we've talked to Gamut. Do you believe in God?
Yes, 100%.
That's interesting.
Why? Do you? I don't know. Does that make me a freak? Bring it on,
God,
baby.
No, God, goodness gracious, no. I found God by going down this path. The harder I tried to find the truth, you find out where the truth actually sits. And so I feel like, like the C.S. Lewis and bouncing different things. I'm like, this is going to bug me. I'm going to get off this thing. And I feel like if it's bugging me, there's going to be like 1,000 more people are like, so why didn't you just ask? And I'm like, because folks, once upon a time, that was a taboo thing to say, just like saying abortion. That's a taboo word. Saying God on a podcast, holy Dinah, we're going into there. Well, that doesn't make you crazy. That makes you just
normal.
I think we're fastly becoming best friends, isn't that?
Yeah,
I become best friends. Yes.
I grew up very religious. My grandma is from Belgium, and she actually came here to be a nun. And she hadn't sworn anything yet. So Roman Catholic is my background. She hadn't sworn anything yet. She met my grandpa. She fell in love, decided to not become a nun, get married, have a huge family. They were all very, very, my grandpa as well, very, very involved in the church, though. My grandpa still is today. Roman Catholic is, I'm a baptized Catholic, but man, I got to be honest with you, Catholic ceremonies sometimes are a lot. So I definitely practice much more as a Christian in that, even in Catholicism, traditionally, even missing mass on a Sunday is considered a sin. And I've missed a lot of Sunday masses over my days. But I definitely, it's more than just believing believe. It's like, I know that God is real 100%. And I really solidified that too after my ex-boyfriend passed away. It's pretty crazy if you are somebody who's kind of on the fence, and if you just take that jump and, you say, I'm listening and I'm here, just show me and I'm here. The many little miracles that can happen in your life as a result of that. And after he died, I was already definitely on this path before, but nothing solidified all of it to me more than the things that happened after he passed away, that I have done everything in my power to convince myself I'm losing my mind, because there's been so many things that have happened that I could never make up, that I don't even think if I had all the money in the world, I could have like paid somebody to make it happen. And to me, it's just like, without a doubt, there's been too many things since he died. And I know that the Bible doesn't say a whole lot about suicide. But I have a pretty hard time believing that somebody who just unfortunately was really plagued with a lot of darkness when he was really vulnerable, that he wouldn't be welcomed with open arms. I really have a hard time believing that. So yeah, God is good. I don't know. I was going to say Christ is king, but then I might turn out like Candace Owens and everybody will hate me. So I'm not going to do that.
Well, my thoughts on this, because I am kind of, now you got my curiosity piqued, on the strange things. When I came back from Ottawa, and I've told the story on and off, like if you've been listening a long time, you've heard lots of this, but regardless, somebody said to me, what happened in Ottawa? And I was like, I got 4 things you can pull on, and you just tell me what, it's stress, lack of sleep, spiritual, or drugs and alcohol. Because you don't know this about me, but I went to Ottawa and had an experience that opened my eyes to a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came home, I was a bit of shell of myself. Anyways, this person goes, Seth, goes, well, we all know it's spiritual, so let's get to it. I'm like, okay, why does everybody know it's spiritual? He's like, and then we started talking about it. I said, why don't people talk about this? He's like, oh, they'll deem you crazy. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
They deem me crazy for COVID, right? Like, I mean, what are we talking about here? Let's get to the real stuff. Because real stuff actually matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think we're crazy by now, you turned out a long time ago. And
That's true.
And that's fine. But like, Christ is king. If that gets you deplatformed, I think that shows what the other side's doing more than what you're doing. So to me, I'm all here for it. I'm glad I asked, because I was like, this lady's checking off a lot of boxes. I wonder if she checks off the most important one, which I would have never said 4 years ago, right? That's been my journey. So I appreciate you sharing. And if you want to get into the strange, we can swap strange stories. Believe me, I got my fair share too.
We'll have to do that. I do have to hang up on you soon here, mostly because I have to go to the bathroom and my dog's whining at the door. But honestly, I would absolutely love to get into the strange with you. So we will absolutely have to
there you go. That is the nicest way for a guest to exit the show, folks. I would totally love to, but I'm about to pee myself and I need to run. Jasmin, thanks for doing this.